But what I've seen on TV footage, film footage, is of men, women, and children on the floor of Al-Aqsa Hospital in a state of total devastation, and there are scores, possibly hundreds of people who have died, and inevitably our hearts break at the loss of those lives when they're civilians, who did not choose to be in those situations themselves. And here in Israel and Palestine, people are really divided on their, where they place their focus on this news.
Now, the EU's top foreign minister, Joseph Borrell, has described the Israeli army's mission yesterday to rescue 4 hostages as a massacre. Health officials in Gaza say more than 200 people were killed. Israel estimates the number of casualties to be a little bit less, at around 100. I'm joined now by the Very Reverend Richard Sewell, Dean of St. George College at Jerusalem, who also works at the Al-Ahli Anglican Hospital in northern Gaza. Richard, lovely to have you back on the programme. Thank you again for joining us.
Good to be with you, Alexis.
We spoke around the Easter celebrations earlier this year, and you gave us an idea of what the atmosphere was where you are and around the hospital in northern Gaza. Tell us a little bit about how the situation is now since we last spoke.
Well, first of all, Alexis, I ought to just clarify that I don't work at the Al-Ahli Hospital. Our diocese runs the Al-Ahli Hospital, so it's very much part of our church's ministry. But my role is as a priest and running the college, which is a pilgrim centre. So I keep in close touch with what's happening at the hospital, but I'm based here in East Jerusalem, so actually a long way from the trouble in Gaza itself.
And how are things at the hospital? I realise that you're not there on a daily basis, but I know that your staff are there. And last time you were telling us about the difficulties that they were facing in trying to keep the hospital up and running.
Very similar situation still today. Supplies coming through are very, very patchy. We're short of all the necessary things to deal with the traumatic situation that the staff are facing. The staff are exhausted, hungry, really struggling to do the necessary, but they are so dedicated. I recently heard a detailed report from our director, Suhaila Tarazi, and she gave really moving testimony to the dedication of the staff, the medical staff. She's not medical, she's sort of the chief administrator, the director, but the medical staff coping under extraordinarily challenging situations, having to do life-saving operations, amputations, all sorts of emergency operations to keep people alive, and under conditions that any of us, any medical person around the world would consider almost impossible to work in, but that's what they have to do.
What has your reaction been to the news yesterday, the rescue operation to get 4 hostages out of Gaza and the innocent lives that have been also lost in that operation?
Well, I think you'd have to be inhumane not to be delighted with the rescue of hostages who've had to endure hundreds of days in very difficult conditions away from their families. And in our churches, we pray for the release of hostages. We pray for an end to the conflict. We pray for the protection of civilians in Gaza and everywhere else. So the release of 4 people and the reuniting of them with their desperate families who have been, distraught beyond words, it is a good thing in itself, and I'm delighted for them and the joy that they feel, and that stands on its own. It's just a good thing. But the conditions, it's for me impossible not to be distraught at the loss of civilian lives, that have been lost in the process of rescuing these four. Getting to the exact truth of what happens is really difficult, and there are different accounts, whether you listen to the people in Gaza or whether you listen to the Israeli sources. But what I've seen on TV footage, film footage, is of men, women, and children on the floor of Al-Aqsa Hospital in a state of total devastation. And there are scores, possibly hundreds of people who have died. And inevitably, our hearts break at the loss of those lives when they're civilians, who did not choose to be in those situations themselves. And here in Israel and Palestine, people are really divided on their, where they place their focus on this news. Many people, I would like to think, can feel compassion for both sides and not simply say, I am only concerned for my side, my people, and I could not care one jot for the other side. They are simply irrelevant to me. If we see people like that, if we do not have the fundamental quality of human compassion for anybody, then I think we have all lost our souls. And I think the message of the church here is to keep the focus on each and every individual, the sanctity of life, and to uphold the value of every human life. And nobody is dispensable, and nobody is insignificant. And that's where I am. My heart breaks and has been doing since October the 7th, and was breaking at everything that happened before then as well. We are in desperate times, and the international community should be the ones that bring a deeper, wider sense of perspective that is not just in the heat of battle, but that is urging on both sides to press towards a ceasefire that will lead to an enduring peace, because this war has already been too devastating and is not reaching any sort of end game. And I don't know that it will do by military means. So it has to ultimately be about two peoples who are sworn enemies sitting down to stop the killing, and then the really, really tough work of what on earth happens next has got to be engaged with. And the idea of one side totally winning at the expense of the other side who are losers, I just don't think is an option. Richard, so that's what I am.
It's fascinating to hear your thoughts on this, particularly as someone who's very close to what is happening. Since we last spoke, do you feel that we're any closer to that peace negotiation happening? I mean, you've made your feelings clear that perhaps military action is not what is going to bring an end to this conflict, but do you feel that we are getting closer or further away from a sit down and a negotiation to bring this horrific conflict to an end?
I did feel when the latest ceasefire and peace plan was put on the table, and the energy with which America presented it and has sought to put pressure on both sides to put aside their conditionalities, that maybe we were. But I wasn't holding my breath, because we've been here before and things have been dashed. And right now, I wouldn't say I've lost hope in that process, but I'm not feeling any sense of optimism. I think both sides are still locked into a sort of military mindset and a sense in which not wanting to make compromises. It's going to take a superhuman effort from the international community to force both sides to sit down and sense that the continued killing of hundreds of people almost on a daily basis, and the holding of hostages and the loss of lives that will come from that, to seeing the futility of those things. And if alternatives are put on the table that lead to a more secure and peaceful long term, then there is the incentive. But while either side thinks they're going for total victory and they will not accept anything other than the total defeat of the other side, then a state of conflict is going to continue. And that's the sense of despair that we feel, that we do not feel there are words of caution on either side actually being prepared to make sacrifices or compromises that will enable really constructive, peaceful negotiations to take place.
Richard, thank you so much for your time. It's good to speak to you again, and I hope we speak again soon.
Thanks, Alexis. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
That's the Very Reverend Richard Sewell, Dean of St. George's College in Jerusalem, who also works with his staff. His staff work at the Al Ahli Anglican Hospital, which is situated in northern Gaza.